The day Marcus Holloway lost access to the lake he had grown up fishing beside felt so petty that, at first, he honestly thought someone had to be joking. One random afternoon, after years of quietly living in the same lakeside community, he pulled up to the familiar gravel entrance and found a brand new metal gate stretched across the road, polished signs warning, private HOA access only, and a neat little notice explaining that residents outside the homeowners association no longer had rights to use the shoreline. Just like that, decades of routine disappeared because a handful of entitled board members suddenly decided the rules had changed. Bro, hearing stories like this always gets under my skin because it feels so painfully realistic. You spend years minding your own business, paying taxes, helping neighbors, and then somebody with too much authority decides they own your peace. But Marcus had no idea this humiliating moment would trigger something nobody saw coming, because instead of backing down, he started quietly planning a comeback so absurd it would completely flip the power dynamic around that lake forever. Marcus Holloway had lived near that lake long enough for it to feel stitched into the background of his entire life. Before sunrise fishing trips, summer evenings skipping stones, cold mornings walking the shoreline when life felt too loud, the lake had always been there, steady and familiar. The strange part was that Marcus technically never cared much about the politics of the neighborhood. He lived on a slightly older property bordering the upscale development managed by the Homeowners Association, a place filled with polished mailboxes, perfectly trimmed lawns, and residents who suddenly acted like neighborhood governance was some kind of corporate empire. For years, nobody bothered him. People waved. Some even borrowed tools. During storms, Marcus helped clear fallen branches from shared access roads without asking for anything in return. That was exactly why what happened next felt so bizarre. Apparently, while Marcus was busy living his life, the HOA board had been quietly restructuring property privileges. New bylaws, revised membership tiers, updated land use agreements, the kind of paperwork almost nobody reads because most people assume common sense still exists somewhere in the process. Except common sense had apparently packed up and left town. Marcus only discovered the change after showing up one Saturday morning with fishing gear in the back of his truck and finding himself locked out behind a newly installed gate like some random outsider. What made the situation sting even more was how unnecessarily personal it felt. Nobody informed him directly. No letter. No phone call. Nothing. Just a sign at the entrance and an uncomfortable conversation with a volunteer neighborhood compliance representative, who politely informed him that his property sat outside HOA boundaries and therefore no longer qualified for recreational access. Hearing that almost sounds fake, right? But honestly, this is exactly how people behave when tiny bits of power get involved. Suddenly somebody who volunteered for landscaping committee starts acting like they're running national security. Marcus tried to stay calm. He asked questions. Apparently, according to the revised rules, only dues-paying HOA residents could use the maintained docks, trails, shoreline, and designated launch areas. Since the association now technically controlled lake access points through easements and adjacent property ownership, they considered everything restricted. What really bothered Marcus wasn't even the inconvenience. It was the attitude. The quiet satisfaction some people seemed to have while explaining it to him, like excluding someone was somehow productive community management. At first, Marcus assumed there had to be a misunderstanding. He contacted county offices. He pulled public records. He checked historical maps because, deep down, something felt off. The lake itself wasn't privately owned, at least not fully. Certain shoreline parcels bordered public easements, older family-owned land, and undeveloped sections surrounding the water. That detail sat in the back of his mind longer than he expected. Then things somehow got worse. Word spread embarrassingly fast. Neighborhood gossip moved like wildfire, and before long Marcus started hearing weird little comments at local stores or during errands. Casual jokes about being on the wrong side of the gate. Small laughs. Tiny smirks. One HOA board member even publicly bragged during a community barbecue that enforcing standards was helping preserve exclusivity. Bro, exclusivity. Over a lake people had enjoyed for generations. That wording alone would have irritated almost anybody. Still, Marcus stayed quiet. And that silence confused people. Because while everyone assumed he was embarrassed, angry, or preparing to argue with lawyers, Marcus had started noticing something hidden inside county property records that made his stomach drop for an entirely different reason. The land surrounding the lake, huge portions of it, wasn't nearly as protected or expensive as people assumed. In fact, several forgotten parcels had been sitting untouched for years. And once Marcus realized who owned them, everything changed. Marcus did not immediately jump into action, and honestly, that part makes this story feel even crazier because most people would have exploded emotionally right there. Somebody humiliates you publicly, cuts off access to a place tied to your memories, and starts acting smug about it. Most people either start a legal war or spend weeks rage posting online. Instead, Marcus became weirdly patient. Quiet. Observant. For that silence started making people underestimate him, and if there's one thing stories like this prove over and over, it's that people get dangerously comfortable the moment they think someone has accepted defeat. Over the next few weeks, Marcus dug deeper into county filings, property maps, and tax records during evenings after work. What originally felt like curiosity slowly turned into obsession because every new document revealed another layer of arrogance hiding underneath the HOA's confidence. The association controlled several key access roads and maintained docks, sure, but the actual geography surrounding the lake was messier than anyone admitted publicly. Around the water sat scattered parcels of neglected land, narrow wooded strips, forgotten lots, abandoned access zones, and strange pieces of property left untouched after old inheritance disputes or bankruptcies years earlier. Some owners had moved out of state. Others barely remembered they owned anything there at all. And here's the part that genuinely blew Marcus's mind: nobody from the HOA seemed to care. The board acted like the lake already belonged to them emotionally, socially, and practically. Residents strutted around talking about their waterfront lifestyle, while assuming nobody would ever challenge the setup. Marcus noticed something interesting during community newsletters and public filings too. The HOA kept emphasizing exclusivity, premium property values, private recreational identity, language designed to make residents feel protected from outsiders. That branding mattered because it influenced home prices, neighborhood prestige, and local perception. Translation: the image of control around the lake was worth serious money. Then Marcus found the first parcel. 5. It was small. Overgrown. Technically useless to most buyers. A forgotten wooded stretch hugging part of the shoreline near an undeveloped curve of the lake. Cheap annual taxes. Minimal competition. The kind of property investors ignored because it lacked immediate resale appeal. Marcus nearly laughed staring at the listing because, suddenly, an idea started forming that felt ridiculous enough to actually work. He bought it. Quietly. No announcements. No drama. Just paperwork. Then he bought another parcel. And another. This was where things slowly shifted from frustration into something dangerously strategic. Marcus realized the fragmented land ownership around the lake created opportunities nobody had stitched together before. Separately, the lots looked meaningless. Together, entire access paths. Shoreline visibility. Maintenance easements. Potential road rights. Space for docks. Space for legal leverage. Meanwhile, the HOA kept doing what entitled groups always seem to do when they feel untouchable, getting louder. A board member reportedly joked at a gathering that people outside the association should enjoy looking at the lake from Google Maps. Another resident complained publicly about non-members parking nearby because it cheapened the atmosphere. Hearing stuff like that almost feels unreal, but sadly, anyone who's dealt with petty neighborhood politics knows exactly how quickly small authority turns weirdly theatrical. Marcus listened. Marcus smiled politely. Marcus kept buying land. And nobody noticed until one quiet county notice appeared on a public filing board that made several HOA members suddenly stop laughing, because Marcus Holloway now legally controlled more shoreline-adjacent property around the lake than anyone expected possible. 6. The mood around the neighborhood shifted almost overnight, though most people still didn't understand why. At first, whispers spread quietly, confused questions at mailboxes, nervous conversations during HOA meetings, sudden glances toward county records nobody had cared about before. Marcus stayed calm, mowing his lawn like nothing had changed while rumors snowballed around him. Bro, this is the kind of moment where arrogance starts cracking, because the same people who loved control suddenly realized somebody else might legally control pieces of the world they treated like private territory. And Marcus was nowhere near finished. The panic did not arrive all at once. That was the fascinating part. At first, HOA leadership tried pretending nothing had happened, almost like acknowledging Marcus's growing land position would somehow make it real. Publicly, they stayed polished and confident, still sending newsletters about community upgrades, shoreline beautification, and protecting member privileges. But privately, people started scrambling. County filings were suddenly getting downloaded. Emergency board discussions appeared on meeting calendars. Residents who once acted smug started quietly asking questions nobody had considered before. Wait, what exactly does Marcus own? Could he block pathways? Change easements? Build something? Restrict views? Suddenly, exclusivity felt way less comfortable when somebody else held leverage. Marcus, meanwhile, kept doing something that made everyone even more nervous: absolutely nothing. No angry speeches. No legal threats. No dramatic neighborhood confrontations. He just continued his normal routine like a man completely unaffected by months of humiliation. And honestly, that silence started becoming terrifying for the people who underestimated him. Because if someone is furious, at least you know what they want. But when somebody stays calm after getting publicly embarrassed, that uncertainty messes with people.